God exist in time? Yes, but not the kind of time you and I exist in. Actually, what is time itself? Well, time can be defined as a measure of change. I think that is the simplest and ultimate definition of time. The way it will apply to time in every category of existence. Time is simply a measure of change. Well, let's look at category of times to see how this can apply. You see, there are three categories of time in the created existence. First, we have the temporal time. This is time in the physical sphere, and it is chronological. That is, it exists in a chronological fashion, flowing in one dimension, and it is strictly regulated. That is 1 second at a time. It flows forward, never backwards. Now, let's see how it is a measure of change. We get this physical time, this time in a temporal life, from the motion of the earth. Like we know, we get the minutes, the hours, from the rotation of the earth. The way the earth rotates on its axis. That's how we get the minutes and the hours. The globe is divided into 24 longitudes, those imaginary lines. And as the earth turns, that's how we get an hour. And then you get a whole day when it makes a complete turn on its axis. Then we get the months, in the change in location. As the earth moves in its revolution, that is, as it moves around the sun, the position it changes from one point to another on its own orbit, or it's elliptical. That's how we get months. And then when it has made a complete revolution, that it has gone around the sun, then we get a year. So from this we can see clearly, obviously, that time is a measure of change in location. That is temporal time. Temporal time is a measure of change in location. Well, let's look at dynamic time, which is time in the ethereal world. That world is at the level of our mind, where our heart functions. So that dynamic time is not regulated. It is erratic. It's not perfectly regulated like temporal time. But temporal time is used as a yardstick. It's because, although it's not the most important of all the times, but it is the one we know first. It is the one that we become conscious of first. So we use it to measure other forms of time. So now in temporal time, you can get, it has no fixed regulation. That is, you can get days in hours. That is, some days will seem longer to you, while some will seem shorter to you. Because dynamic time is a measure of change in state of being. While temporal time measures change in location, dynamic time measures change in state of being. That's why as a certain state of being, it will appear faster, it will move faster, while in some state it will be slower. Just imagine when maybe you step your foot or you sit on a hot place or fire. A minute can change to hours or days, And imagine those days when you're doing things you like, you're so happy. The whole 10 hours can be reduced to a minute. At the time, sometimes even the time will appear to stop. That's how dynamic time is. It is a time that really powers our heart. That is ethereal time. Then the third category is eternal time. Eternal time is a measure of change in cycles. We know at a deeper level, every form of existence exists in cycle. And that is the eternal part of this creation. Like we all know that everything that exists is energy. And energy, like we know, is eternal because it was not created and it cannot be destroyed. So it has been moving from one cycle to another. That is the eternal part of life. So eternal time measures change in cycles. This is a sphere where angels and other extraterrestrial beings, other eternal beings exist. God is in time, but he is not subject to temporal time, to dynamic time, and eternal time. Because these three categories of time are time in the created existence, and God is not created. God is a pre-primordial existence. God has been existing right before the beginning. So God is in absolute time. And what is absolute time? Absolute time is time in the now. It is always in the now. Now we can see conception. The conception of absolute time poses a lot of difficulties because our consciousness is conditioned, is rigorously conditioned by temporal time. We are so used to temporal time, and in that temporal time we have now. The temporal time is never starting. Even as I'm speaking now, it is moving second after second. It never relents. So now using it to understand a time that no second has passed from the beginning of all eternity to all eternity. No second has passed and no second will pass. That is time beyond created existence. That is time that belongs to the divine alone. Only God dwells in this category of time. Well, let's take this analogy that I believe will throw more light on this. Let's take the solar system as it is. We can see there are many planets going around it. Now, if you check the way time is, even in the planets, it will tell us more about how absolute now is. Mercury is the closest to the sun, and it has just 88 days to make a year. Then Venus has 200 and something days to make its own year. So the farther away from the sun, the greater will be the number of days before a year could be achieved. So maybe if you check the 1 year in those planets that are far away from the sun, you find out that it will be in tens or hundreds before they make a complete year. That is, we use the year in our own planet to measure. So according to the 8 days, Mercury just has 88 days in its own year. Now, but if you go closer, even if you go to the sun, let's assume a sun is a habitable place. You can see that in the sun, in relation to all the other planets, no day has passed, no second, no hour has passed. Because in relation to all other planets, the sun is not moving. And like we said, time, temporal time, is a measure of change in direction, change in position, in location. So since the sun does not move, it means it is always in the now in relation to the other planets. So that's why even those that move, those that are closer, they take shorter days, shorter time to make their year. And as far away from the sun, the longer will be the days taken to complete that year. So likewise, God is the center of creation. And where God is, there is no change. There is no change in location. He does not change in location. He does not change in state. Neither does he change in cycle. So that's why God is in the absolute now. Before him, no second has passed and no second can pass. Because all those things, all categories of change are products. All categories of time, are products of change. And there is no any form of change that exists in God. So there is wide margin even between God and the angels. Angels are still within created existence. Eternity, the eternal, is still part it was created. Although it does not have end, but it had beginning. It is primordial time that has no beginning, which is the divine, the time where only God dwells.